I think the last decade of, forming the identities and getting forward, I think we're becoming more aware of this, the emerging self. Because when you start breaking the beliefs down, which can be quite scary for some people, because it's like, well, you're kind of facing yourself. That part of you then grows that might have not been able to grow in the past because you had to push, you had to do all the other stuff, because you had to become something that you thought the world wanted you to be.
So you're trying to live up to promises that for other people almost.
Yeah, it happens a lot, and we have to remember that, our parents and caregivers do the best with what they've been given and been passed down from the generation that they've had. And I'm a flawed parent as well. My children will have things to work through as they go forward. And I hope that I bring them up to understand that, they're not on this planet to meet my needs. They have to go and find their own way. My job is to put the support network around them and give them what they can and know that I'm there for them when required. But I've got my own life task to complete, and they need to find their own life task to complete. And I think that's one of the healthiest ways that we can bring our kids up, which is really difficult when we see them hurt or in pain, or we want to take care of them, and depending on what age they are. So we have to remember that, there's there might be a necessary process at the start, which towards caregivers or parents, where anger has to be there because it needs to be worked towards. But we have to understand that people do the best usually with what they've been given, and there's a choice. You either want to learn about it and understand it, or you don't, and you put it all down to bollocks and get on with what you're doing. And both are fine. We're all different.
What would you say were the biggest personal patterns you had to break to lead to like the business success you've had in terms of like exiting businesses and things like that?
Wow, that's a good question.
Because that's a lot of growth in that period of time.
It is, and it's funny because I was thinking about this. in the last couple of days, and the real polarity with this is a lot of the times you never really know until you've got on the other side of it. And that might be a real think like, give me the magic bullet. But the learning doesn't come till after. And I think very early on, we were talking then about your scaling systems and that raw energy that you've got early on. Have you really got time to think about, and all that? Probably not. You've just got to put your foot down. You've got to go. And you have got to go. It's maximum input. That dictates the outcome. And if you're in that energy, and you've got that about you, 9 times out of 10, you're going to get forward. It might be messy. It will be messy. But a lot of the times they'll learn it. But again, it comes back to the space thing. Where's the time for reflection to put back into it? One of the biggest things with me, and I kept self-sabotaging in my behaviour, in many different ways. I knew I had ability. I knew I had skill to get forward. There was something I'd do, and I think, God, I could have been there now, or I could have been there. But then I seemed to pick myself up, and like when my back was against the wall, or I felt like I was on my knees, it was like that bounce back was, and I got in that pattern that become quite addictive. Like, fuck it up, bounce, and there's probably some ego in that, like, because I'd overcome something. But I was hurting myself and other people in the process, and I was obviously unaware of this. But one of the biggest things was I wasn't scared of failing. I was actually scared of success. And that was one of the biggest things that it was like in a way, wanted to stay relatively small, not be seen. And it's like, all right, well, why? What is that about? And I think being on a pedestal in a way early on is quite a lonely place, and living up to expectations or perceived expectations. So if you don't get to those points, if you don't then, you can't then let people down. So stay away from the success. But then there's this other part of you that wants to succeed. And this is where this...
conflict.
Absolutely, conflict. and where the drama comes from, because you don't want to sit without it and you don't want to sit with it.
And is that why you think you maybe yo-yoed up and down?
Yeah.
And that's why, because I see this all the time with entrepreneurs.
Yeah.
And the biggest thing I see with people who we coach and help with their businesses, whenever their business isn't doing well, it's a personal issue.
Yeah.
And normally that personal issue is some type of self-inflicted issue from some type of poor decision they've made.
Yeah, 100%. The whole of suffering in life comes from interpersonal relationships. And the first one of those is the relationship with yourself. And the decisions and the behaviour that you make are based on those. And we talk about, I mean, everybody's different. You'll get very successful people that love KPIs and track, and you'll get people that have never looked at a balance sheet in their life. So there's no which I'm personally not a KPI man. What I do know is that the bottom line of your business is directly linked to your belief system. I know that. And I'm not sat here saying that I've got this wonderful belief system. I struggle, because I want to get forward. I want to get forward. And as soon as I'm going into new territories, the brain does what it does. And it's like, whoa, let's throw this in there. And, all these, like you were saying, all these things come up, what could go wrong. Because the neurological pattern in the brain, going back to the brushing the teeth, once we're triggered with it, the brain responds at 1/50th of a second. Excuse me. 1/50th of a second. That's how quick it responds. So it's pointless trying to think, I'm never going to have these beliefs again. Because you can't outrun that. Even you can't outrun that with your pace. Yeah? So it's like, well, what then? Well, the body knows. So the brain might go at 1/50th of a second, but you haven't yet acted on it. But if you're not connected in here, the behaviour comes from the mind. But let's say something's going on for me and I'm like worried about something and I'm all in here. If I start moving into here and I can feel it in my chest, I can feel it in here, then the brain, all right, well, this is where we are. This is going on for me. And then from there, you can maybe make different decisions or different choices, becoming aware that you're in this, what I call the identity, the IDM. And it's that shift from that into the I am, which is the newer version, that's the bridge. And it's the body that holds the bridge.
Now, I'm not going to sound like Stephen Bartlett, but I know a lot of people coming onto our podcast and who are not subscribing but still enjoying the content. If I have one small ask from you, it's please hit the subscribe button. It'll help us a lot. Do you have a system or a process to identify what is the thing that's kind of holding you back? Because I think obviously what I see the most successful people is they're generally very self-aware. And I found, particularly the last 2-3 years, I've become much more self-aware of catching my thoughts and then how I can manage that and try and manipulate it back to the frame I want.
I think that there's a couple of things. The TLC framework's good for that because it's like threat, lack, or chaos, and it's like, all right, but before you can get to that, you've got to get aware of like it going on and catching it, and that's where I use something called space, which is sense, S for sense. So, all right, so you can feel it in your body. So there's something's going on here, and it's the body that's feeling it. Then you've got to stop. You've got to pause, and you've just got to give yourself that space, that break, and that might be with the breath. It might be a walk around, do a lap of the park, whatever. But you've got to pause, and then you've got to ask yourself, where's this coming from? Which one is it serving? The TLC. I'm in the identity here. It's, I hear it a lot, but it's like we've got to stop thinking that it's a bad thing. It's really not. You need both of them because that's the bit that's pushing you forward in a way. And it's there for good reason. It's there to protect. So once you've asked which bits it's coming from, we then get to choose, which is the choice. We then get to choose the next step, what we do. And then the E is the embody. We've got to then bring it back to the body and feel it. Yeah, so that's the space framework. And it might be that you do that after the event, as weirdly as that sounds. It's like, shit, that happened. I made that. But you catch it early. And then you can go back and think, right, what was that? What was that? What was that? Sorry, bloody throat. Terrible. So that in itself can be really useful to be able to break it down. And then from there, which is a framework that I use with the actual growth equation that we talked through before, I have a page that we draw it out on. So we look at the outcome that you want. So let's say that it's a coach that wants to sell more courses. Like, that's the outcome. All right, I want 250 grand worth of income this year. So straight away, that big goal, and I think it's important to have these, loosely throw these things out there, but not get too bogged down with the outcome. I think that's really important. I mean, there's great books out there, The Power of Why and all that. You can spend so much time trying to dig into why things are important to you. But loosely a goal, a big goal. Right, I want $1 billion AUM, throwing that up there. But that's going to feel quite big, and it's going to scare some people, yeah? So what you've then got to do is go back to the inputs. And you've got to look at the inputs, like the light, like the soil, like the nutrients, like the water that you're going to pour on it, and maybe the cutting back some leaves, and all this stuff goes into the growth of the plant. So you've got to draw up a list of inputs that are directly correlated to that outcome. Nothing else. And this is where we get really focused on how we're spending our time. And it might be as simple as, all right, let's say I'm camera shy and I don't want to do any work online. You don't have to jump straight to putting a post out with the camera. You might order the microphone from Amazon. You might set it up in the room. You might record one and send it to someone that you trust. You might record 10 and just look at it yourself. You haven't put anything out yet. But these little inputs, what they do every time you make an input towards it, the brain starts to then focus. It starts to become normality. So you don't have to go to this massive thing straight away. But as long as you're making dedicated inputs towards that outcome, you're on the right path, and it can stop that freeze. It can stop that impasse. Even when it feels really hard, you can feel it in the body. It's like, fuck, I do not want to do this. All right, well, what thing can you do that feels palatable? But it's making that. You might message someone and say, I'm struggling with my social media. Would you mind just giving us 10 minutes? Do you know what I mean? Like, they're all dedicated little inputs that go into the growth and meeting the output. And then you've got to look at the space and think, right, what space am I creating for this to happen? Maybe because you're avoiding that, you're spending time on tasks that don't relate to it. Maybe you're getting pulled into drama from other people. You think, I've just dealt with a lot of family drama over Christmas. That. So maybe you start saying no to things. Maybe you go and learn about it. So, but unless you're creating space for that to happen, it's not going to work out. And then the time part of it is anything that goes really in the diary from there has to be one of those inputs, or it has to be something off the 7 Hungers framework, which I'll come to in a minute. And really that bit of putting that out there, and you might have different outcomes for different things that you're doing. It might be work, it might be your relationship, it might be you're a father and what that looks like. So it's a really good tool and framework to be able to use. Say, all right, what do I want? What am I working towards? Don't get too obsessed with that outcome. Have it there. Have it as a pointer in the future. Because the reality is, it never really ever works out how you expect it to. I never, was expecting to sell my business at the time. In my head, it was probably going to be in 20 years down the line. But every decision I made, every little moment accumulated to that result. And when it came, I was in the game because I'd given myself the opportunity by all those decisions that I'd made over the previous 7 years. And I could go back way before then. That winning penalty I scored on Sky against Bournemouth in the FA Cup was a 30-second snippet. But I had years. The 4 clubs rejected me before I went to Shrewsbury. The training, the rejection, the laughs, all that went on. My mum and dad taking me to football training 7 times a week when I was a kid. They all built up to that one moment. So that it's always an accumulation of small moments that at some point accumulate in what we then class as a win. And that's so important, to never underestimate that. Now, however small it might seem at the time, you keep dripping things in towards it, it will naturally start to manifest and change.
So there's a couple of things you said there and unpack. Something I'm a massive believer in is micro urgency, macro patience.
Okay.
So it's like,
cool.
Whatever it is, you need to do it now as quickly as possible.
Yeah.
But in the long run, you need to be very patient, because my mental framework and goals has changed a lot in terms of, okay, I have to make this much this year, do this much.
Yeah.
Whereas I now will think, okay, I want to make this much. I'm trying to reverse engineer back. Okay.
Yeah.
Let's say you have an online business. How many sales calls do I need to book every single month? Then that would be our leading indicator that I'm then going to be, okay, that's the only thing I need to focus on.
Yes.
Providing other metrics. And then the outcome will come if we can do that. Absolutely.
Because you trust your process. You know that you've got the ability and skill to do it. And that's only become possible because of the years before when you didn't know whether you had the skill, because you were not shooting in the dark, but you can believe in yourself, but until someone pays for it.
Are we delusionally optimistic?
Yeah. So that makes sense that's shifted. It's like, right, well, the brain's like, right, now we've got the evidence that this works. So all I need to do now is manage this input bit. And of course, things will change and trends will change. So there will be inputs that you'll be making that you'll probably be doing, we do naturally. And we look like at trends, what's going on, right? The marketing side of it, what's working now, what's someone else doing, what research are we putting into what other people are doing and how things are moving. All those are inputs into the future outcome that you're looking at doing. You know, the learning that you're doing, the additional stuff into leadership and all that are the inputs. We do it subconsciously. Do it very well subconsciously. But when you become aware of why it works, and I link it back every single time to nature, this is a blueprint for growth.
The most interesting thing you said about the nature analogy is the space. Yeah. Because something else, this is being filmed in start of January, a lot of people will set big goals for this year, all this extra stuff they want to do. So they want to add more stuff on their plate, but you can't add more stuff on your plate until you've taken stuff off of your plate.
Absolutely.
You can't do everything.
Absolutely.
Like you couldn't be a professional football player and then run your business at the same time.
No, you're absolutely right. And some of the leaves have to go, and that process can be quite difficult. Again, based on our beliefs about relationships and stuff. But unless we're creating the space, I mean, on the farm you've got fences there, right? And you get a horse, for example, that will respect the fence. I mean, it knows where it is. It's been trained how it is. If someone walks up the track with some feed and the pigs are in that field, they don't give a shit about the electric fence. They're through it. They don't give a shit if they're zapped. They're just through it, or they'll tunnel under it and they're over there. So their desire for food is much greater. The fear's gone because of the desire what's over there. And it'd be similar for the cows or the sheep or whatever. So these electric fences, these boundaries, if you're thinking of an invisible circle around you of space, but where does it end? So you've got your physical space, but then you've got your mental space. And if you look at a tree, how it grows, take the redwood, that biggest tree in the world. Interestingly, you'd think it'd grow like that physically, but when it's that big, if you made a mark on the tree there and it grew 100 years and it grew another 100 feet, that mark would still be in the same place at the base of it. The base doesn't grow, it grows from the top, from the canopy. So it's like, what's the mental expansion that we've got? And there is no physical limitation on that. So that boundary, that invisible boundary that we've allowed ourselves to put in place, which is safe for where we see it at that time, is there, but we think that's it. We allow the brain to, but it isn't. It's just an invisible boundary. Have you heard the one about the fleas in the box jumping, haven't you?
Yeah.
And there's loads of fables like that.
It's like the baby elephant with the little chain.
Baby elephant with the chain. the electric fences, Pablo's dog, the collar that round the dog, zap the electric, and they use them now in farms, electric collars around cattle. So there's no fences there, but as soon as they get to the boundary, it goes off, and they're like, oh, shit, go back over there. So we have to ask ourselves, who put the boundaries there? These limitations that are there for good reason, protection, and they once would have protected us. And let's go deeper into that, because this is important. So I'll give you an example, and I'll change, obviously, names and places and all that. I had a client once who specifically remembers coming to therapy with, it's like third 18-month relationship, doing well at work, struggling in personal life, kind of an acceptance, this is the way it's going to be. So we start going through that. Anyway, one memory he has is going to give his dad a kiss at night, and his dad pushing him out of the way and saying, fuck off, watching the TV, right? So as a child, one thing that you can't do is make the parent bad, because they're the ones putting the food on the table. So you can't sit there and go, hold on a minute, I've got needs here. The parent has to, until you get to the certain ages of 13, 14, 15, and you start becoming more aware, they're on the pedestal, because that's nature. There's a hierarchy. They're putting a roof over my head, they're putting food on the table. The parent cannot be bad. But I've got all this negative feeling inside me, so what do we do with it? Well, I introject it back on myself, because it's got to go somewhere. So one of the biggest fears we hold, there's the three main areas that we're trying. So there's the fears, but it's like, what are we trying to get away from? One is shame, public annihilation. One is abandonment. We're going to be chucked out of the group. And the other one is hopelessness. There's just literally no hope. There's the three things that we're trying to avoid, as opposed to a physical death. So now he's got this natural impulse to want to love and connect, but he can't get it. But he fears abandonment or rejection. So he tells himself that he's the problem. He's not worthy of love. And that wonderfully stops him going to get the next kiss. It keeps him safe. It stops him getting pushed away by his dad. And that works. That decision at that moment in time was right, because if he kept going and kept getting pushed away, the brain for a child is like, I'm abandoned. It's death. So he adapted very well. But here he is now, and filled that with doing well and getting praised by working hard and all that different stuff. Yeah? The more I'm achieving, we see this a lot, particularly with men, the achievement. That's why this emptiness, the fulfillment, because there's never enough. You never stop to go, fucking well done. Because it's like, no, next mountain, next mountain, next mountain.
Hedonic treadmill.
Yeah. Because the fulfillment's not the goal. The goal is the recognition, the external validation. Because if I've not got that, then who the fuck am I? So in a relationship, he's now got this belief that I'm unlovable deep down. Part of him wants the relationship. Another part of him doesn't want to get abandoned. And that's where the impasse comes in. So this is where, when I say we create beliefs and we hear it so much, they're outdated. All right, great, they're outdated. That doesn't really help me in the here and now. It's an outdated belief. Like, what is the depth of it? And this is where they come from. And I always use the example of like the wayfinders. I don't know why it comes back to me that of old, they didn't have maps. They just navigated off the patterns in the sky and the past stories passed down. And I think we can't get stuck in the past. It doesn't serve us, but we can use it as guides. We don't want to sit there for 24-hour days trying to remunerate over things. That's not going to work. But in those space create, if we can piece together, connect the dots, this is why, maybe that's why, and become curious about how we've constructed the belief about ourselves, just like we've been saying about the mental creation of the universe. Our identities have been mentally created to keep us safe so that we fit into the group. So once you start to understand that, when these problems come up, when these ceilings get hit, we then get into a place of like, right, well, what's important and where do I get on from here? And that one thing that happened, it was only last week and it really brought it home for me. The business we bought last year wasn't a massive business, but it had all the regulatory licenses that we need. So it was valuable in that sense. And the guy had sadly passed away. And it was his son dealing with it and his widow. And they were very happy to, let it pass on and let it go on. And I remember last year going to meet her and she opened the car and she literally gave me nothing was on computers. It was like proper old school. And I got all these files and I'm like, come on, I'm thinking, okay, that's a bit weird, but there's a sense of responsibility in this and blah, blah, blah. So anyway, you go through it, which is quite normal. You cut back. So you go, right, 70% of it, don't need that, but I better keep all of this stuff. So anyway, a year passes and this stuff's just sat in the folds and not come out. And then we've been sorting some of the space out back at home. So I get these files back out and I'm sat looking at these files and some of them go back to like 1970. And I'm like, wow, this is the guy's life work. And now I'm sat here with them in my hands. And do you know what? I've no doubt that at some point in his life, he would have been held back by what he thought I thought of him. And he never fucking met me. It's like, oh, shit, what are they going to think? We get so caught up in not doing because of what we think people are going to think of us. And I don't know what, he will have his own files and personal stuff at home and what that's like now going forward, 12 months on. But what really hit me, and I've like, I need the space. I haven't got the room for it. So that, I'll have no use for them. So they went on the burner, and it really brings me back to it. It's like, well, what is there really to worry about? Of course, we've got worry, and naturally we need that so that we, it helps us navigate the decisions that we make. But when I get stuck in my mind and questioning things, I go back to those questions. Am I putting effort in? Is my effort high enough? Because if it's not, then there's something that I can control there. I can go and put more effort in. And if it is really high, then I'm trying. And that's also all right. And longer term, what is it really all about? Because he won't be remembered for the PI quotes that he got on file or what he just won't. He'll be remembered for who he were, how he made people feel, what he did. So it really comes back to like, what is the nature of business? What's the end? What's the game with it? And I think that changes as we develop and we change and we grow. It's a different energy that you're in when you're starting out to it is when you get into the middle bit and you get into the upper bit. And having that witnessing of yourself is so important. Like what's going on here, questioning it. Not tying yourself in knots, but like just looking at it from that perspective.
Do you have a process you use on like a daily, a weekly, monthly basis to kind of analyze things like that?
Not rigidly. It's just something that comes into the psyche. And again, it comes back to the space thing. Because if you constantly got your foot down to the floor, you're constantly in that fight, flight, get forward, which we need. But that blocks it because the body's doing cortisol and adrenaline. It's going to that, what's it needing? It's survival, it's drive. And I don't mean that in any negative way. It's just like we need that raw energy to get forward. And it's only when the space comes in, and that might be, walking down the track or walking around the block. It doesn't have to be like a weekend away in Brazil. It can be a really simple moment, leaving the phone, going for a walk. It's then when the things are allowed to come and manifest and things. You need that time for self-reflection. That was one of the big things that we had on the day. It was just that like time, that people actually got to come together.
Now, if you enjoyed this clip and you're a coach, creator, or a business owner and you want help in terms of how to scale your business using ads, AI, content, marketing, a lot of things we talk about on the show, then hit the link at the top line of our description in the YouTube video. You can book on a call with us and walk through the whole process, audit your business and show you where there's huge, huge opportunities for you to scale.